Hello and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I am Harry Colfer. No, I'm not. I'm not Harry Colfer. I was looking at Harry Colfer.
You're head hopping.
You're gonna have to use that one.
Should I edit that one out or not? We might have to keep that. I'm actually Jack Roney, and with me is Harry Colfer, and this is the Genre Fiction Podcast. And I have not been drinking, I promise. And we're here with Lauren Daniels. So this is our second episode chatting with Lauren. How we both doing? Ready to get underway?
Go for it.
Yes.
All righty. So last time we spoke issues relating to characterization. Now we're going to focus on some topics relating to story structure, and again, some editorial advice, Lauren, that you'll give to any budding writers who might be listening. So let's talk about prologues. I know Harry and I have actually discussed this in previous episodes. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on how can we make a prologue work.
Great. This is a great question because as an editor, I see a lot of manuscripts and people want them. And I know that there's a lot of various advice. Some editors, publishers don't like them. Some love them. But what I tend to see where things go wrong is that the prologue doesn't serve as a snapshot, a teaser, a trailer of what's to come. And I think a prologue, to be really good, gives you the tone, gives you the central conflict, gives you an atmospheric quality. You know, I think of Thomas Harris's Hannibal Rising. That is my favorite prologue of all time. And if there's anyone who's watched the Hannibal series, they know that they loved it so much. Brian Fuller loved it so much that they had, Will Graham's character and Hannibal's character actually speak the prologue out in a session, like a therapy session. And it was so cool. As I've used it in workshops to say, this is what a prologue can do. I don't expect yours to do this. This is Thomas Harris. He's on the moon. He's a different kind of guy, but it's looking at like really high octane stuff. And that's what I think. If you want to be a writer, put quality stuff in your system, right? Another I think of that's completely different, like a universe away from Hannibal Rising, is The Pillars of the Earth. And I use that as an example. There's a hanging. And the moment that you step into that world, you know that this prologue is telling you you're leaving your life and you're coming into the past, and you're going to be with people who are so different. Because the children, I remember there are these little boys who are so excited to go to a hanging. That's how I recall it. And the town square, and the people are all gathering and bustling, and there's markets, there's all this going on. And it was so effective because it just set a tone, it set a mood, it made a promise to the reader. This is what the experience of reading this book is going to be like. And I find sometimes I get prologues that are vastly different from what the rest of the manuscript is like. There's no promise. It's almost like there was like throat clearing going on behalf of the author, where they're trying to find their story. They're pantsing just like the rest of us, right? And they left it in. Is the problem. So and I usually say things like, rethink this. Where's the core conflict that we're going to revisit for every page of the rest of the story? We're in a completely different timeline. I'll have a speculative fiction work where the prologue won't even match the timeline. It might be in the present and the whole story happens 2,000 years ago, or something like that. So have your prologue, like, I guess, think movie trailer. Think about that. Think about the energy and that art form of really whacking your reader with something that says, hey, we're going somewhere, trust me.
With Dead Regular, I've got a prologue in the first and the third novels. And with Dead Regular, when I originally wrote, it was a scene that was in the past that was what caused the serial killer to do what he's doing. Hopefully that's not too much of a spoiler, that I've just blown there. But anyway, how I did it originally when I wrote it was I wrote numerous little sort of snippets from this scene and just dotted them through the book. And I had an agent read it, and his feedback was that was too confusing. You need to condense it somewhere because it was dropping me out of the story. And so I condensed it all down into one chapter, which I then published as I put it in as the prologue. And I've actually had paramedics come to me saying things like that prologue sort of encapsulated all my worst fears of my job in that one. And
Right.
so it is, and I remember asking somebody, you know, was that autopsy scene in chapter 6 too confronting? And they said, look, if they can get through the prologue, they'll be fine with the autopsy scene. So it is reasonably, and I wrote it in a way that was I wanted it to be a different timeline, because that was how it was being interspersed throughout the book, but I wrote it in present tense because it was in the past, and the book's in past tense, and I just wanted it to look different. And so that, I think, makes it almost more confronting, because it's happening as you see it, and it's a big car crash. So yeah, it certainly is confronting. And I mean, I like the use of prologues, but as I say, I don't always use them. And ironically, this latest book, I didn't write a prologue, and as I said, it's over 13 hours, and so I wanted it to sort of start off and go through. And of course, you know, because it's focusing on a paramedic who's starting his shift, he wakes up at 5 o'clock to go on a shift, and all of the feedback, a lot of the feedback that I got was, this is not the way to start a book in somebody getting up.
Yes,
and
that's right.
So then it was a case of, oh god, yeah. So then I was right, okay, I know, I'll write a prologue, and that will really set the tone. So, you know, even though the first chapter is this bloke getting up to go to work, you know that a lot is going to happen to him.
Yeah, well,
So,
characters waking up, I tend to steer authors away from that. I say, don't start with us waking up anywhere ever. Like in science fiction, it'll happen, but in travel writing, I just woke up at my destination. And I think, if you're going to do that to me, you better wake up with something funky going on. So something funky should be going on, Harry. And any way you want to define that, like, grab my attention with this character waking up. Don't make it gentle. You know?
Well, certainly the prologue has somebody waking up, but that's definitely not gentle.
Good.
So.
Okay.
So I've got a final question for you, Lauren, about prologue. So for someone who might be a little bit confused about, sometimes you probably see it where a prologue perhaps could just be a chapter 1. So so if you were to give your golden piece of advice around what, and I think you gave a really good explanation, but if you were to sum that up into a golden piece of advice around what distinguishes a prologue from a chapter 1 for people who are still unsure.
Make it shorter. Just make it shorter. Quit stuffing around. You know, really, I find that prologue, I've seen prologues that are like 10 pages long, and I'm just like, that's not a prologue, that's a chapter. Like, cut that out. And you've wasted your opportunity to really just rip the curtain open and say, here, you know. So do something explosive and emotionally powerful or gritty. You know, it should be emotionally charged too. Don't make it soft. There has to be a that energy has to be there. And I think it works best if it's really tight. I mean, if you really want an example, get on Amazon and have a look at Hannibal Rising's prologue for Hannibal. It's his mind palace. Oh my God. It's poetry. And it's only, I mean, a couple of paragraphs, and it's laden. Now, again, disclaimer, you don't have to write like that. You're not Thomas Harris. It's fine. But let it inspire you and do your own thing, you know, but do it with great economy and with the gloves off.
Right. Well, I've actually got the Hannibal Lecter omnibus. I think that's the 3 books in one.
Wow.
I haven't read it for a long time. I might go and flick through that prologue once we finish here tonight.
Yes,
okay, so that's
before bed, Jack. Before bed.
Yeah, give me some nightmares, maybe. So now let's move on to info dumps. I know this. So tell us about what are your thoughts about information dumps?
Yeah.
You know, about how do we drip feed backstory versus bam, too much pages and pages of info dump.
It happens a lot. It happens in a lot of different genres in a lot of different ways. I mean, you can have an info dump in the narrator. I mean, that's probably the most common one, where the narrator, I'll never forget, this was when I was first editing and I was doing a science fiction novel for someone, and the first chapter, there was a speech given by a politician to tell us about the world building that the author should have been doing. So it was a layered, and I remember saying, speeches are boring in real life. In a science fiction novel, you're killing it. You're killing it. Come on, and who likes politicians? You know, make him dirty and keep it tight is all I have to say. So we had a politician speech, and then when the main character got the job of piloting this spacecraft, he had to sit through videos to show him how to pilot. And we were getting play-by-play of what the videos were like. And I thought, no, put him, forget the training program, skip ahead, put him in the seat and show his nervousness, you know, of what he's got to do. I mean, that's the emotional charge, you know. So info dumping can be speeches, they can be letters. People can be so sneaky and get a letter dropped in to get, you know, to do backstory or whatever. Another way that's really sneaky, and this was so easy for an author to do, where you have an author who's very familiar with a landscape or a country, and they're maybe writing historical fiction or they're writing culturally charged fiction. And we have, Dad, can you tell us the story again of why the renegades are invading our village? Sure, son. Let me tell you everything you need to know. And I'm like, how many times has this character had this conversation? I mean, I'm walking in here. Don't, you know, treat it like it's every day. And these characters already know. So iceberg it. I just want to see the top of the iceberg. Let a lot of stuff be underwater, you know? So a dialogue is a way for people to info dump. And I think, you know, caveat with this, for your first draft, info dump the snot out of it. Like, really go nuts. Let yourself info dump on every page, because it's very hard to articulate a story out of the ether. Okay. But this is what editing is for, right? And then you clean it up and you pepper things, you pepper the facts through the scene work and the action beats. So yeah, through dialogue, through narration, those are probably the two most dominant ones that I see. And people try to be pretty sneaky about it. But I just tag it and say, pepper it. That's what they tell us in Everson, like sprinkle it through the prose.
I really like that idea of peppering information, and I really like it when an author does a slow reveal about the character. The character might be a very deep character with lots of layers to them, like, you know, the old cliche, peeling the layers back off an onion. But when they slowly, you know, they don't do the info dump and tell you all you need to know. Here's a bio of your main character. Over time, you slowly get to know your character as information is revealed. Maybe they've suffered some sort of trauma, and you know that they've suffered some sort of trauma, but you don't know what it is yet, and it's impacting on how they see the world today. And slowly you start to learn more about what happened to them, which has made them the person that they are now. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, you're, of course, Fall of the House of Ushers at front of mind for me right now, which I'm watching. And the main protagonist, the father of this Usher family, is not with the wife that he was married to early on. And they don't tell you for a long time what happened to her. And I think that idea of withholding information, and she's lovely, and she's the mother of his first two children, and she's there, and they're young, and he's just starting out. I mean, he becomes this great big pharmaceutical mogul, you know, but before all that, and she's really supportive, she's a good person, and because of her qualities and because she's there at the beginning and then she's gone and you don't know until later, it creates tension. So refusing to info dump actually creates more tension and pacing and drama for your story. Yes.
Yeah, I really like that idea of withholding and keep your reader guessing, keeping them wanting to find out more about your character and turn the page. And yeah, I think it's a really good mechanism to keep your reader engaged.
Yes.
There is one caveat though, is that sometimes you have to do a little. If I'm going to do it, I'll keep it as brief as possible. But when you're doing a series, and although each story is completely separate, and there are things that happened in the previous one that the reader needs to know about if they're reading this separately, and sometimes you have to have that little bit of a snippet of information just to keep them on the right page, because otherwise they wouldn't know who the hell this is if they've just picked the third book up.
Well, you know what, Harry, too, you have to have exposition, you have to have backstory, but keep it lean. You know, you have to, in a short story, you try to restrict it to a paragraph or a couple of lines of exposition or backstory or grounding the reader. In a novel, you have a couple of paragraphs maybe, but they're taut and they're interesting. It's when you start burying the reader in it, or if you're finding that you're bored. I think if the author's bored, that's a signal.
Definite
Actually,
signal.
that's a good segue for the next topic I want to talk about, the saggy middle.
Yes.
We're not talking about underwear or anything here. We're talking about a saggy middle of your story. So tell us about the saggy middle.
That's the old Act 2 problem where people, they're thinking of their story in 3 acts now. They've pantsed it and now they're starting to plot it, and they're talking to me about their story, and they're saying things kind of dry up a bit in the middle. And I think one of the remedies for that is to do a little, after you've pantsed it, you can do a little outline of your action beats and list out, here's all the stuff that happens, and it should all be rising conflict. So, rising action heading towards that climactic moment. And I always ask the author to think of Jenga. If you can pull out an action beat, if you can pull a scene out and the story doesn't collapse, maybe you should pull it out. And maybe you can also tighten or shorten the amount of time between action beats. If you do things a little more quickly, it does increase the pace, So, and in fantasy novels, it might be things like sparring or fight scenes, like make sure every fight scene has a cost, the injuries are real, there's a lasting effect. We learn something about the character in the fight scene. We learned how far they'll go, or if they'll go against their value system, all those little beats that are kind of typical for the second act. Tighten them up. I think those are pretty good tips for that.
I think as a writer, you start to sense. I know, as I said, I'm hitting a bit of an obstacle with the manuscript and writing that right now, where I feel like it's missing something, and I know where I need to get to. I've already planned where the story's going, but I've just got to get over this hump. And you can kind of feel it yourself. But do you have any tips for writers in terms of how do they kind of recognize for themselves that perhaps their writing does appear that they've hit a hump, or things have slowed down too much, or it just seems to have lost its way there for a while? Any tips for writers if they sort of feel that's happening, or maybe they haven't recognized it for themselves?
Gosh, there's a lot to that question. I think one thing you can do is take a break from it. Another thing you can do is write a short story. Look for a submission call on Submission Grinder or Horror Tree or whatever, authors, and was it Poets and Writers, pw.org. Like, look around and write a short story to refresh yourself. Like, sometimes you can paint yourself into a corner and you just need to get some fresh energy. Something else you can do is look for things that'll really inspire you. Like, I love to go out and find myself a good movie. If I'm working on something, I need to get off, because I read a lot for my job and I'm constantly ordering books for Kindle and reading in bed and falling asleep with the phone hitting me in the face, all that fun stuff. So I do love to go and see like a movie that really stirs me up. And one recent one was this movie called Mustang. And it's about a man in prison, and it's a prison program where they're given wild horses to break, to make them purchasable. And there's this one man and this one horse that I have goosebumps just talking about it, because it was a character study. You've seen it?
Yes.
It was very little dialogue, and it was really about the action beats and the emotional quality. And I think it was Bruce Dern's final film too. So his, maybe what, I don't know if it was his final or close to, his performance was incredible, and it was small. So you see something like that to help you with your saggy middle, or your you can sense and trust that sense that something's missing. It can help you fill that in. And I also think go get some chiropractic or a massage. And my chiropractor gets me a piece of paper and a pen, because when my face is in that hole and I can't do anything, I get ideas. And I solved a plot problem, because for Serpent's Wake, I had gotten my 2 characters down into the bowels, like underneath a cathedral, underneath the catacombs, because I'm fascinated with that, where some cathedrals, like Chartres was It was an old site before Christianity, like the, what's before the before. And so I got them finally underneath this site, and then I didn't know what to do with them. And I was stuck for weeks. And it was
So
in the
were they.
chiropractor.
So were they.
So yes, they were. And I felt bad. It's like they're just staring at you all the time.
Do you get that? Do you get that? Yeah. I'll if I've had a gap and I imagine these characters are all standing there next to the door going, oh, for God's sake, come on, hurry up,
I know.
and get on writing the rest of the story. So
looking at their watches. But it was that. I'll never forget it, because he came in, I'd been in the face hole, and I'm like, dude, piece of paper, please. He goes, really? You got to put me in the acknowledgements now. But something about that shift of consciousness that you can have,
Yeah.
Where I'm struggling right now, it's more of a bit of a technical nature, because I am, as Harry would know, I am more of a planner. And because this particular manuscript, because it's 2 timelines that are told concurrently, so as you alternate between chapters, you're going to the past to the present. And I'm aiming for my 2 storylines to merge at some point, for the sort of climactic sort of part of the story. But I'm having trouble technically, because there's certain information that I need to withhold that I can't reveal too soon, because it'll ruin the other timeline. So the historical timeline can't reveal certain information that the person telling the present timeline should know. So I'm going to have to stop at some point thinking this isn't working, and I might have to go back and kind of rejig. So sometimes when you have a major obstacle, I just, it's become a little bit all too hard. So that's why I'm just taking a bit of a break from it. And I'm sure that the solution will arise. I'll wake up one morning 3 o'clock in the morning and it'll come to me.
Yes. Before you go to bed, you can ask. I sometimes ask my mind to solve the problem. It's a weird, I know I'm being recorded, but I'll go to bed and say, look, I'm stuck. I'd like to ask whatever's in charge of the machinery to throw me a bone. And sometimes it works.
Yeah. It's amazing how the brain works, or a dream or something. Yeah.
Yes.
So I just want to move on to foreshadowing.
Yes.
What are your golden bits of advice about that?
Well, I find that I can't write foreshadow until I have the draft done, and just some kind of wobbly, flea bitten draft. If I have something to work with, I can go back and plant seeds. And that's something I give as advice to writers I'm working with. Like, don't try to do it all at once. Don't spin 11 plates all at the same time. You'll lose it. You'll break them. So go back after that first draft is done and ask yourself 2 questions. Where can I plant some seeds of what's to come? And also something that kind of fits well with that is, where can I lace a motif? So a lot of people forget to do that. And motif is such an easy and powerful layer to add to your fiction. When you think about Heart of Darkness, Light and Darkness is on every page, Joseph Conrad's novella. Even the use of red in M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. I'm sure he didn't write that in his first draft. It was something that he laced in and thought, oh, well, that'd be genius. Put her in a red dress, make the doorknob red, make the balloon at the birthday party red, and it'll go up the spiral staircase. It's something that I see in the editing stage, where people moan about, oh, I hate the editing. I'm like, that's when you put the flowers on the table. Like editing is where you can put in the joy and the joie de vivre of your story, the colors and the light. I mean, to me, I think the easier part than pulling it out of the air. So for foreshadow, I hope I answered your question of, be patient with yourself, lace it through a little bit later. Also think about motif at the same time. Are there some repeated images that can grow into something? If people aren't sure what motif is, it's a symbol that grows in meaning specific to your story. So like light and dark is the condition of the human soul for Heart of Darkness, or red signals something supernatural for M. Night Shyamalan. It's just one of those things that you can layer in later.
And I'll try, just segueing into motif. I think it was when I attended your writer's workshop, and I was currently writing my manuscript. And when I went back and did my editing and adding layers later, there was this concept of a boy he did it by habit. He would pluck out a piece of a long grass stem and he would chew on the grass just by habit. And then that theme reoccurs throughout the book. And because it's got a twist of time travel where there's an elderly man and he also starts chewing on a piece of grass stem. And, it's kind of a bit of a couple of, sort of hidden clues interwoven if the readers are observant to that.
Yes,
I think
Easter eggs.
It's cool when you come up with those while you're writing, but I do agree that you can quite happily layer those in afterwards. Sometimes I'll stumble across something because I'll write it and then a bit later on I'll go, oh, I wrote that, and then I'll add it in, and then I go, oh, that'd be cool if I keep doing that. And that is something you can do while panting, but certainly, adding the complexities, I think what definitely a take-home message for any new writer is the fact that just because you've finished the first draft doesn't mean your book's done.
Oh God, no. Ernest Hemingway said, I don't know what this blog is, I'm sorry, this podcast is rated, but Ernest Hemingway said the first draft of anything is shit. And you need to know that and embrace it and say, I'm going to write that today. I think sometimes when people are listening to podcasts like this, they might feel like, oh, I got to remember all this now. No, you don't. Just write the thing, get it out, get it down, and know that first draft's a mess. And that writing is editing, and the professionals who make it, who win awards, who pump out, volumes and epics and journeys for international readers. These are people who polish those diamonds. I have some friends who are incredibly talented people, but they don't edit. So they don't, they're kind of, their talent and their genius is kind of floundering because they struggle with the idea of perfectionism or rejection. And I just think, oh, come on, you have such good life experiences to share, but not everybody can, take on the whip in the chair that is the writer's life.
I do have a question about foreshadowing. We spoke earlier about prologues. I've always kind of gone into prologues thinking this is my way to start planning a bit of foreshadowing in the prologue. It's a dun 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 dun, and bit of a dramatic moment, and whether it's a flashback or you're just kind of setting the scene, or it's a scene in the point of view of the serial killer who we don't know who it is, but he's lamenting about what he plans to do. So I've kind of used prologues as my way of that initial foreshadowing. But are you saying that foreshadowing should be or could be more of a progressive thing? You continue to foreshadow as your story continues?
You can do it once or you can do it a few times. I think it depends on the story. If you plant one golden seed and it foreshadows an event down the track, that can work beautifully. I think
the only thing is that you have to be careful that the reader doesn't go, oh, right, you're going to see that again. Don't make it too obvious.
True.
Yeah, don't telegraph it. And I've just got one final question for you, Lauren, before we wrap up. It's a point you've raised, this question of, do you deliver? It's all set up, but the biggest possible bang doesn't go off. So you foreshadowed, you created this tension and set it up for your reader who are hoping that there will be this climactic conclusion. How do you know, as the writer, how do you know whether you've delivered or not?
This is where you need your beta readers and you need your writing
totally great
buddies. You do, because you don't always know. You're in the forest. You've been wrestling with this hydra, by yourself. You don't always know. And in fact, when I started out, I wanted to write horror. I grew up in New England. I wrote to Stephen King. I read everything he wrote when I was a kid. I just thought he was I wanted that life. I thought I could live in
Did
Maine.
He respond to you?
He did. He did. Wow. I have my letter. It's right here. Actually, I keep it on my desk.
Wow.
See? It's dated March 1st, 1988.
Wow.
And what's weird is the stamp is a koala dancing with a American eagle, because it was 1988. It was the year of your
bicentennial year.
Yeah. That's just weird. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, all that aside, what was I talking about? As soon as I talked what was the question, Jack?
Delivering. Does your story
Deliver.
Do you
deliver?
Yes.
deliver?
Yes, sorry. No, I don't. All right, that's right. Thank you. I wanted to write horror, but all of my studies in bachelor and masters, they really, in the 80s and 90s, they steered me away from horror, and they said, no, you can't write horror. It's garbage. What are you doing here? So I ended up, going into magic realism and going into other arenas, and even going into memoir and personal essays and that kind of stuff to really learn the craft. But now I've come back full circle because horror's doing really well, and it's acknowledged, and it's a respectful genre, god darn it. So one of the issues I have, though, and I think it comes from that lack of just that concern, I guess, of being too horrible, is that I need to be told, take it one step further. Be a little meaner, Lauren, like blow everything up. And one of my writing buddies, well, that's all she needs to say to me. She sees my drafts and she says, okay, you're almost there. Be mean, Lauren, take it. She'll say to me, it's all set up. Hit everybody with that mallet. And I say, thank you. I need you to give me permission to be absolutely just wild. I need that. That push sometimes, but it comes externally. And I mean, I can have the most like horrific kind of scenario unfolding for my characters, but I know that the readership is saying, take it one step further. But again, you need buddies. You cannot write in a silo. You cannot. Yeah. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. You can write in a silo, but your work won't go as far as you could. You need people pushing you. So do you deliver? Is the biggest possible bang going off? Find out what your readers are saying, your betas and your buddies.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I get some of the beta readers, they'll say, oh, thank you so much for letting me read your book. Yes. And it's like, no, I need you to. I really do need you to, because, and they'll sort of like apologize to, this is earlier on, they don't do it now. They'll apologize for sort of saying, well, I think you need to do this. And I'm going, no, that's what I need you to tell me. That's why you're getting to read it. I need that information. I need that feedback so that I know what works and what doesn't work. Because in my head, it all works. It's all great. And if it didn't work, then I would have changed it before I sent it out to the beta readers. And so in my head, it's all working, and I understand everything that's going on. And then you get these questions back, and you go, oh, perhaps I haven't been that clear. And yeah, it is so important you get that feedback.
Yes, the worst thing they can say is, it's great, I loved it.
Yes.
And you think, wait, what? No, tell me where the holes are. I know I can sense them, but I don't know where they are.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, great advice. So get that advice from beta readers. So look, we'll pull up stumps there. Time has gotten away on us once again. It's always, as always, it's been a fantastic opportunity for us to chat with you, Lauren. Really enjoyable. Again, anyone out there who's listening to this would like to find out more about your writing workshops, jump on brisbanewriters.com. Whole bunch of information there about services you provide for writers. So thanks again, Lauren, for your time, and we'll leave it there. For those listening and who have enjoyed our conversation with Lauren, please stay tuned, because you'll be back again. We've got another episode to go through some genre specific conversation. We're going to talk about all the different specific genres and things that you pick up when you're conducting editing. So stay tuned for that next episode. So thanks again. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll speak to you next time.
Cheers.